turn our attentions and focus on what's happening at the United Nations, because Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Shirley Ayokobochi, says Ghana will not recognize any annexation of Ukraine territories by the Russian Federation. While addressing a special meeting of the United Nations Security Council on the maintenance of peace and security of Ukraine in New York, Shirley Ayokobochi noted that Ghana remains committed to its position that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is in breach of international law and is unjustified.
People. Ghana does not and will not recognize any territory that is unilaterally and forcefully required or acquired as dismembered from a sovereign entity. We reiterate the call on the Russian Federation to immediately and unconditionally cease its operations, withdraw its troops from the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, and respect its neighbors' sovereignty and political independence. The need for a credible pathway for a genuine diplomatic process is urgent. The barrel of the gun does not provide such a pathway. It only leads to needless loss of lives and destruction on both sides. Indeed, the costs of the war have been high, not only for the parties, but also for the rest of the world. As the President of Ghana said yesterday in his statement at the General Assembly, I quote, "Every bullet, every bomb, every shell that hits a target in Ukraine hits our pockets and our economies in Africa," unquote. In this regard, let me place on record Ghana's appreciation for the good offices of the Secretary General and other international actors to leverage life-saving humanitarian interventions at critical times of the war.
And a number of questions are beginning to emerge about Ghana's decision to condemn Russia upfront. So let's bring in Dr. Ishmael Holombo. He is an international relations expert joining us live via Zoom. Thank you, sir, for your time. So let's assess what it is that Ghana has stated at the United Security Council. Of course, we're not having a permanent seat, which means that we're on the non-permanent seat. But in quite an unconventional fashion, you find the foreign minister going all out on Russia. Is that a safe thing to do as a developing nation? Yes, I can hear you loud and clear now.
Okay, all right. Good evening to you and your listeners. I think that, yes, it is safe, provided we do it within the context of the multilateral environment that we are doing it. It's not like we are unilaterally condemning Russia's action, but of course, it is very important that Ghana states a position on this very important international development. This is a crucial development, which is one of the ingredients that we have stood for all these years, making sure that we have an independent opinion on international development.
But then we do know that some bigger nations, for instance, China, have abstained, for instance, when it comes to the public or outright condemnation of Russia in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So why are we not having Ghana follow suit just to play safe, if we could use that word?
Okay, you have to understand some actions within the context of what the actor is doing. If you take China, for instance, China has its own geostrategic reasons for abstaining. It has issues of territorial claim in the South China Sea. It has same issues, particularly in relation to Taiwan, which it has always said that if pushed to the wall, they will use force to take. So looking at Russia invading Ukraine and the response of the international community is just like a replica of what China may do if pushed to the wall over its sovereign claim over Taiwan. So yes, you must also understand that the kind of relation between Russia and China, they are quite close as at this moment. So yes, a power like that may not speak to this issue in terms of condemning Russia. But if you look at Ghana, historically, we have involved a certain policy stand over the years, and we base our foreign policy on a number of principles, including respect for international law, respect for sovereignty, And then, of course, we are interested in peaceful resolution of conflict. So given our own history as a colonized nation and over the years being a country that believed that territorial sovereignty should be respected, we cannot stay aloof and watch this without making our positions known. So it's very important you put it within the context of China and the context of Ghana.
And then a lot is happening at the United Nations Security Council. We see that trend, constant one, first of all, starting from the president, trying to paint the picture about how there's a direct impact of what's happening in Ukraine on Ghana. They continue to say that every bomb, every bullet that continues to shell or hit Russia, Ukraine, I should say, has a direct impact on our pockets here in Ghana. A lot of Ghanaians are yet to come to terms with that statement by the president. Is he, in your view, over-exaggerating, or if we could use that word, exaggerating the situation and the likely impact of this war on developing nations such as Ghana?
Well, looking at the forum that the president has to speak, it is important that he highlights the effect of the conflict on the rest of the world, not only on Ukraine. And of course, if we distance ourselves from saying that it doesn't have any impact, in natural fact, it's having an impact on us. For instance, we know that since the war began, food prices have gone up, and particularly grains, because both Russia and Ukraine are major producers of cereals for the world market. So yes, the impact has been with us, but it's also about our own domestic policies. We cannot solely say that it's because of the war in Russia and Ukraine that has caused all the economic problems that we are facing. It speaks to, for instance, our agricultural policy over the years. Are we able to sustain ourselves in the absence of food supply from other regions, for instance? That also is a question we should be asking ourselves. So yes, it is right that the president pointed out that the conflict in Ukraine is having a major toll on African economies because of the interwoven nature of the current international political economy. There is any major development anywhere will have an effect across the globe. And countries that cannot adapt easily in terms of having domestic strategies and policies that will be hard that region.
And of course, we've started seeing some superpowers yielding to the constant demand for a reform itself on the structure of the international system, particularly the United Nations. The US President Joe Biden, they're backing the issue of a possible reform on the United Nations Security Council itself. The fact that there should be representation from the likes of Africa and Latin America. We know that Ghana would maybe putting itself up as a candidate, possible one, of course, but giving our insistence that Russia is not approaching the Ukrainian war properly, could they not veto our chances and also try and sabotage us?
To understand, you want to say that, well, given our own interest, it is good to play a kind of neutral game, and so that when we need the assistance of Russia, then we will be able to draw on the assistance. But you see, Ghana's foreign policy, since Kwame Nkrumah, has involved a particular concept of positive neutrality. Now, you should differentiate the idea of positive neutrality from negative neutrality, which simply says that you must not care whatever happens, that should be neutral. But the concept of positive neutrality, what it actually entails is that while you make sure that you don't take sides in a major conflict, you must also be able to state your independent view on any international development. Now, this is taking these positions akin to saying that you will just mind whatever will benefit you. But you see, invariably, Russia's action in Ukraine will draw a certain precedent that other nations that may want to advance territorial claim may follow. And of course, in Africa, where you may not know if other powers may also start to make claims in Africa in terms of territory. So you must also begin to defend your own territory by making your position known to countries that are maybe force, that the era of using force to claim territory, to redraw the global map, have gone. So we must begin to, as a small nation, your surest bet of defending your sovereignty is to uphold international law. And clearly, as far as international law is concerned, the action of Russia in Ukraine violates the Charter of the UN, which we all ascribe to. So I would disagree that we should play a neutral role because we have certain interests that Russia may be needed. Of course, even during the days of the Cold War, where we were possibly neutral, we still have the confidence to state our independent positions while still watching the support of both the West and the East. It's just a dynamic balance. There are times that, yes, the same Russia can be approached for support, depending on what we put on the board. It's not only because you are saying that, no, this action is against international law, therefore Russia will quickly turn against you. Of course, there are dynamics, there are diplomatic approaches that can be used to bring Russia on board if you need their support.
All right, then. Finally, where do you see this ending in terms of the aggression, as Ghana is describing it, but Russia sees it as reclaiming its sovereignty? Will this end anytime soon? And for developing nations such as Ghana, what could be the likely effect if we continue to experience this war in Ukraine?
Looking at the position of Russia, it will take some time for this to come to an end because they will not want to concede defeat. And from all the overtures that have been made to them, it seems that withdrawing from Ukraine will seem like a defeat to Russia. And so we also have a situation where the dynamics at play are not straightforward. The West has an interest, Russia has an interest. Of course, if you look at what has precipitated this development, for instance, the eastward expansion of NATO, the EU, and the threat that Russia thought that it is being threatened within its traditional sphere of influence. Now, and if you look at how the West has played this game in terms of the support, in terms of military support and other support that they have given to Ukraine, it's as if the West is virtually fighting a proxy war. And once that interest is at play, it makes it difficult for a compromise from the Russian side. Now, what we may see is that, yes, somehow there may be stalemate where Russia maintains its influence over the part of Russia that it controls, the part of Ukraine that it controls, and we will see this kind of a divided country. But of course, there's also room for still negotiating and see if we can set. But I do not see a quick end to this war. It will be a long war. Indeed, Russia went in under the assumption that they could quickly overrun Ukraine. But that is the nature of war. You may estimate that you'll be able to quickly override your opponent. But wars are not predictable. The end of war cannot be predicted. That's why it is the least preferred approach to any international issue, because you cannot predict the end of a war from the beginning. No matter how sophisticated you are, no matter how well armed you are, Russia is facing a nationalist resistance, people who are motivated to die for their country, not just the military of Ukraine. So it introduced various dynamics which Russia did not expect. So I do not see a quick end, and I see an end where you have Ukraine virtually divided between an eastern sphere of Russia and the western part controlled by the Ukrainian government and the West. So we may run around for maybe at least the end of this year and possibly the next year.
Anyway, thanks for your time here on the show. That's Dr. Ishmael Holonvo. He's an international relations expert with the University of Education, Winneba. Now to education itself. You can't memorize your way out of poverty. Well, these words containing excerpts of a viral footage of the Education Minister, Dr. Osei Duchum, is beginning to stoke public debate about Ghana's education curricula and the need to roll out some reform. Dr. Duchum, taking his turn at one of the sideline engagements at the United Nations General Assembly, expressed the view that the mere theory does not change the face of education of developing nations. Now, according to him, the implementation of many classrooms approach projects in Africa is yet to see a conscious evolution in terms of practicalizing lessons for children of school-going age.
To schools upon schools, and I speak with the students. And when I finish speaking with them, I'll say, do you have a question for me? No hand goes up. A hand is just to go up. In all my encounters in Ghanaian classrooms, we have tamed the children. We just want them to write down what we tell them. At the day of exams, they should put down what we have told them. We say, you are the best student the country has ever known. That kind of education system will not transform Ghana. That kind of education system is not going to give us critical thinking individuals, especially since we are in the 21st century and education 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution. You can't memorize your way out of poverty, but you can critically think and innovate out of poverty. So Ghanaian schools, Africans will have to begin to take a serious look at what I call the assertive curriculum. A curriculum that empowers the African child to ask questions and challenge the status quo respectfully within the African cultural context. But not a curriculum that tells the African child to be quiet and don't say anything when the adult is speaking.
Is the minister staying true to his words here in Ghana? Let's assess that. Joining me now is Opoku Mentayao, his deputy spokesperson for the Ministry of Education. Thank you, sir, for your time. For some, this is mere rhetoric. What's the evidence to back what it is that the minister is talking about here in Ghana?
Let me say good afternoon to yourself and to our lovely viewers. What the Honorable Education Minister, the Honorable Dr. Yao said is not a mere rhetoric. It can be seen in the evidence of the implementation and the numerous reforms that is currently ongoing at the Ministry of Education. Now, when we talk of learning, we are looking at learning as a relative permanent change. Now, we are looking at the change in the individual that is relative and it's permanent. And in the process, that individual is able to fit well into the society. So therefore, the curriculum that we're talking about, or which has been designed from the primary up to the junior high school level, and currently the ongoing curriculum for the senior high school level, tells the focus and the core competencies that the learners, after the process, should be able to exhibit for the society and to contribute to national development. Now, as part of the core competencies which are expected that learners are to display or achieve, can be seen where critical thinking and innovation becomes a major hub of what the training seeks to put out after its implementation. So every activity which is done in the classroom or activities under the supervision of the school should lead to these core competencies that we do refer to. And that is what the curriculum is embedded with. An assertive individual that is able to ask critical questions, tame the mind to a point whereby the individual is able to analytically deal with situations and be able to question what the status quo is, so that the individual can also contribute meaningfully to the progress of our nation. And that is why the Honorable Minister said that you can't memorize yourself out of poverty. And if we are to memorize only that, then it will be about examination, cheap off.
Okay, yeah. And it's not as though when the minister is saying this, we don't have schools under trees, for instance, here in the country. You're dealing with issues of lack of infrastructure in all tiers of education. You also have outstanding issues relating to the free senior high school policy, overcrowding in some senior high schools. It's as though the entire education system has a major challenge, and yet we find the sector minister going out to the world to speak as though everything was fine back home.
Why, at times, when I hear of these challenges, and let's not assume that the challenges are taking the better part of what it's currently being implemented. What is important that we should avert our minds to is the positives within what we are doing currently. And it is very important that we do situate the conversation within the proper context, so that we can have a meaningful discussion in that aspect. What we should all avert our minds to is the new phase of our system that government is currently bringing up on board as part of the infrastructure drive. And as we speak, over 875 different projects are currently ongoing, and it spans across the length and breadth of the country. Now, you look at the basic school education level, even at the junior high school level, you hear of minister telling the world that when we talk of secondary education, it should be 6 years. Now, we do have 3 years of lower secondary, which forms part of the basic. And currently what is happening is to put up an infrastructure that fits into what is described as a junior secondary, junior high school level. And that process has started with this implementation. You go to Onye Abenasi, you see the project ongoing. You go to the Jaben municipal, you see the project ongoing. And 35 of them across the length and breadth of the country. And when that is completed next year, each one will be able to accommodate 1,200 to 1,500 students at a go. And it has the science lab as expected, the library as expected, the computer lab as expected. And if we want to give meaningful education, we can't continue to have this system running, which do not equip the learner with the 21st century skill that we've all been preaching about.
Yeah, so what you're doing is simply to scrap the WASI system. You're allowing people to go to school without any form of assessment at such a crucial time of transitioning between junior high school level into high school level. You agree you may be creating some challenges there, don't you?
No, that is not the case. Now, if you look at the various form of assessment, that is that. Now, we have two. Now, we have the formative assessment that we do at the school level. And we have the summative assessment that is on the national scale. And an example of the summative one is the WASI and the DEC that I referred to. So in the formative evaluation aspect, it is done by the school, and the school owns it. And that is what we use, what we term as the continuous assessment that forms part of the basis for the termination point at DEC or at the WASI level. And if we want to put them together, for example, when we talk of assessment, what we are doing, if you want to assess me as to whether I'm delivering on the objectives stated in a lesson plan that you've done, it will be based on the delivery that I give you at the end of the day. And I think our understanding of assessment has always been that we sit only and write. Through my observation, through the expected qualities after the implementation of the lesson, what I put out, if it meets the criteria, the assessment that the teacher sets.
So what happens, briefly, what happens to WASI?
We haven't talked about WASI, that we are replacing WASI with anything.
Yeah, but what will happen to it? You are implementing a new system. What will happen to WASI?
No, I'm telling you that the new system do not do away with assessment. That is why I gave you the two types of assessment.
Precisely. The West Africa system.
Part of it.
But what will happen? Because if you don't have any major assessment happening at that turning point of junior high school 3, you're basically saying we won't have BEC, we won't have, probably WASI then. Just go through school, but get your certificate.
We haven't told the world that we are not going to have a BEC or a WASI. That has never been the language of NACA or the Ministry of Education. And if you care today, if you read the pre-tertiary assessment framework, it tells about the levels of assessment that the learner will have to go through. Those are the school level, those are the national level. And even at the national level, we've recently introduced what is known as the National Standardized Test as part of the summative evaluation or the summative assessment done at the national level. So if we want to look at the importance of this assessment, what will be the basis for BEC? You will need placement, and it becomes an important measure so that you'll be able to place the learner at the appropriate continuation of a school.
Okay.
And for the WASI, same for continuation and either the world of work or whatever. So summative assessment has never been out of the system. And the Ministry of Education the NACA, which is responsible for this, has never communicated to the world that we've done away with BECE or WASI, as it's been speculated. That is never true. We've never said that. We've never communicated that. And we've never even sat around the table to look at that, because we believe, educationists will tell you, after every curriculum implementation, there should be assessment at the tail end. And at the national level, how then do you do it if there is no assessment? That is where summative assessment becomes very important.
Okay, then.
So
final issue.
The others stay.
Right, final issue. You would definitely need more structures in the rollout of these reforms and this new curricula that's in the offing. The e-blocks have come into perspective. Former President John Mahama has complained that you're not taking a look at that facility, looking at what you intend to implement. Now's the time to look at it, isn't it? We are dealing with infrastructure at all levels. Now, per the records, as you know, we came to meet a completed 29 of them, and currently our flower was completed and it's in operation now. And we've been able to add over 35 of them. And if you visited our flower to see what we added on for it to fit the purpose in which the 21st century scale is needed. Now, what we've said that before a school will be operationalized, all the existing facilities must be in place. The library, the computer lab, all the science labs should be in place before we will operationalize them. And a typical example is just recently what the president commissioned the voter at Aflao, that was reported by our outfit. So for infrastructure, bringing on board many of them, you look at the 10 model schools, 4 of them in operation now, others are nearing completion. That is expected to be completed next year and operationalized as part of the process. We are building 21st century schools as well. And I've given an example. If you go to Onyu Abenas, you will see it. If you go to Jabi, you will see it. If you come to Accra on the East Legon stretch, where we do have the GTVET, the TVET offices, there is another one going on there. 35 of them across the length and breadth of the country. And as I indicated now, over 875 at the basic level, which we are implementing. And at the secondary school level, we are looking at 1,135 different projects, most of them completed, others are still ongoing. So it's an expansion work, and therefore we need to understand the motive of government. We cannot wait before we equip our learners with the 21st century skill. If we want to compete with the world, that is where we need to go. An assertive learner, a learner who thinks critically, a learner whose contribution is vital towards the development and the transformation of this country. And that is what the new system, that is what the new reform seeks to put on the table. Right.
We need to embrace it before we can join our other countries as we develop.
We need to go. Yao Pokumensa, thank you for the time here on The Pulse. I'm grateful that you've been able to spend some time with us. You're on The Pulse on the JoyNews channel. We'll take a short break. We'll return with more stories. Please stay.